did anyone who are here today attend the previous class? Of all new? Oh, there's a couple of new ones. Oh, old. Good. So we got a few repeats. And I was heartened to see a few of those who attended the class last time to attend other events that we in Richmonders for Peace in Palestine put on. And they would come up and say, I attended your class. Hopefully it will resonate with some of you that we will see you in future events as well. The way this course is going to go, we have it broken up into 4 different periods. Today's class will be more of a history of Palestine up to 1948. We won't go into the details of 1948 war, but we will go into the history and the events leading up to 1948 war. Then the next class will be from 48 to 67, and 67 to 1993, the Oslo Accords. Then from then to the present, the last class. But being this class is about Palestine, and Palestine is part of the Middle East, and the Middle East is on fire, I cannot start the class without mentioning something about what's, or saying something about what is going on. We have a situation currently where there is a regional war. It's no longer limited to Palestine, Israel, and neighboring Arab countries. And it's involving the Persian Gulf, the Gulf states, Iran, for no apparent or logical explanation or justification for this war, other than to serve the purpose of two people. Mainly the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and he found in our current president someone that he can lead, order around, convince, direct, manipulate, call it what you want. But after meeting with the president 8 different times within the span of a couple of months, it was a race. Who's going to hit Iran first? You're going to do it or we're going to do it? No, we both do it. For what? To eliminate their nuclear threat. That was supposedly non-existent, based on an agreement that we got in with Iran with, and a verification regimen that we withdrew from, not the Iranian. And then all of a sudden, they're about 2 weeks from a nuclear weapon. So we bombed them 6 months ago. And we come out and we say, well, it's not 6 months from now, but 6 months prior to the 28th. And we come out and we say we obliterated their nuclear program. They had it, they were ready to get it, and we obliterated it. That was the assessment. Then 6 months later, they were 2 weeks from producing a nuclear weapon. And it's the same person that said we obliterated it, and expect people to say, yeah, okay, well, apparently we did. And now, we're in shock as a country, and those who supported this war, how come in the funeral for Ali Khamenei, the spiritual leader that we got on the first day, there is tens, hundreds of thousands, possibly up to 10 million people that showed up for his funeral. And this is a leader that was brutal, unliked. He was, the Iranians just waiting for us to liberate them from that authoritarian dictatorship. And we're shocked at the number of people that come out for his funeral. We're shocked at the number of people that show up in Tehran's main square on a daily basis in support of the government. We decapitated the government on the first day. The second day we have a more solid and more radical, possibly, government than the day before, and the people are behind it. So all that information was fed to us, to our leaders, because somebody saw an opportunity, and that's namely Benjamin Netanyahu, for expanding the borders of Israel and continue to ethnically cleanse Palestine. And he does not hide it. He does not mince words. And even when he came to the UN and he had the map that he showed, it didn't show political Israel. The map showed greater Israel. Greater Israel from the Euphrates to the Nile. And now they have taken southern Lebanon, good part of Syria, the West Bank. Gaza, they're still trying to ethnically cleanse it. The war wasn't never about Hamas. We'll get into that later. That's because we want the Gaza Strip without the people. So that brings me to our class today, and that is, what is this idea of greater Israel? How was Palestine prior to the creation of Israel? How was Palestine prior to the creation and the founding of Zionism? And it's interesting that Zionism as an ideology, it was first ever mentioned was in the 1880s, and then in the 1890s, with the formation of the Zionist movement, and Theodore Herzl solidified it. Before that, the word Zionism didn't exist. And now, I stand here in front of you and say that Zionism is a racist, is a supremacist ideology, I get labeled anti-Semitic. That's interesting. This is a purely political ideology that was invented in the late 1800s. And it wasn't invented with the idea of Palestine. No. Palestine had people in Palestine. Let's just take a look at Palestine. The Zionist movement claims that biblical text that God Almighty gave it to the seeds of Abraham, and the seeds of Abraham all of a sudden are nobody else but European Ashkenazi Jew. Well, the seeds of Abraham, I happen to be one of the seeds of Abraham because Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. I'm a descendant of Ishmael. And you can get my DNA anytime you want. I have no problem with it. Zionism has nothing to do with religion. None whatsoever. If you want to look at Palestine, let's go back a little bit further than Abraham and his descendants, or the two kingdoms of Judea and Samaria. Palestine was inhabited long, long before any of this. Probably community and settled life in Palestine began 12,500 to 9,500 BC, where there were actually settlements, villages, and they were thriving. Settlement life, like in the Natufian culture. The Natufian culture, and you can Google that, it's named after Wadi Natuf, and that was 9,500 BC and before, which is in the West Bank, west of Ramallah, Wadi Natuf. And the Natufian culture didn't just settle in Palestine, they settled in the Levant, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. And when you look at the ingenuity of the people in Palestine, archaeologists have dug the first sickle, the actual sickle that's used for harvesting wheat and other barley and other crops. And that was dated to 23,000 BC. But they were using tools for culture, for agriculture. So, if you want to dig more into that, there is somebody by the name of Karina, C-A-R-I-N-A, Nebel, N-E-B-E-L. That's from the Department of Biology, University of Turku in Finland. It's not a Palestinian even. You look at Jericho. You all know Jericho. The longest continuously inhabited city on planet Earth. From 9,500 BC. And they have farming and population of 2,000 to 3,000 people at that time. And they developed agriculture, produced grain, cultivated wheat and barley. They had an irrigation system. So that is way before anybody else can say my ancestors from returning. Then from 4,000 to 3,000 BC, the Stone and Copper Age, villages and towns grew. Houses started to be built out of stone and mud and bricks. And they had a copper working industry. Then we go to the Hellenistic period, which is getting closer to the birth of Christ. The 332 to 63 BC, Alexander the Great conquering the known world at the time. And we have the first Jewish revolt against enforced Hellenization into the Hasmonean kingdom that was established in 129 BC. So there was Jews in Palestine. I'm not here to stand and say, no, Jews don't belong there. No, they do. There has been Jewish presence in Palestine since a few years after Judaism. Those Palestinians who converted to Judaism are Jews, and they're in Palestine. Those who came with Moses, they're Palestinians. And there has always been, and don't let anybody mislead you as to the return. No. Palestinian Jews, there have always been Jewish presence in Palestine. There has always been a Jewish community in Palestine that lived in peace and harmony with other Palestinians. When Christianity came about, and our Lord was born where? In Bethlehem. So there's Palestinian Christians. He preached where? Bethlehem, Nazareth, traveled all over Palestine. He got crucified where? He got resurrected where? In Palestine, in Jerusalem. So there was never a problem between the different religions in Palestine. The Palestinians, Muslims, when Islam came about, and Prophet Muhammad traveled that night journey, Laylatul Isra wal Mi'raj, from Mecca to Jerusalem, then ascended to the heavens. It holds a special place for Muslims as well. So yes, Palestine is holy. That's why we refer to it as the Holy Land, because it really is. There isn't an inch that you could walk on that somebody didn't walk on before you, whether it be from the founders of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. I grew up in a village northwest of Jerusalem called Bir Nevada until I was 14. And we would go out into the fields and play like any other kids. They didn't have iPhones or iPads, or didn't have electricity, so we have to make do with whatever is there. And we would find these caves, and we'd go in them and dig in them, and we come out with little things and didn't know what they were. We played with it. They're archaeological artifacts. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. This is Palestine. That's how it is. So it was a thriving society. And to give you an idea of how this thriving society was, sometimes you hear the other side say that we came, and that's part of their selling point, to the rest of the world and made the desert blue. What desert are you talking about? The olive tree that my grandmother transplanted from one piece of land to our house to be closer to the house, so we keep an eye on it from grazing animals and what have you. It's estimated that it was like 4,000 years old. In 775 AD, there's a gentleman by the name of Umar Zafir al-Zaydani. He was appointed governor of the Akka area by the Ottomans. Well, he created his own militia and broke away from the ruler for the Levant, who was stationed in Syria, had his own army. And why did he do it? For economic reasons. He was exporting 775 before anybody touched the desert and made it blue. He was exporting citrus and cotton to the Middle East and to Europe. Seven century. Export, not just enough for local use. Palestine is part of the Fertile Crescent. The desert is in the Negev, and Lord and behold, it's still desert. It's still referred to as the Negev Desert. That's another reason that it's still a desert. We'll go into that later on. It's because it's mostly inhabited by Palestinian Bedouins, or Palestinian Arabs. That's why it's still a desert. And nothing has changed for the last 100 years or so. Palestine went under many occupiers, like the rest of the Middle East. But the longest was the Ottoman. It was occupied by the Romans before, the Ottoman Turks. That's what's really important, is that occupation for 400 years. Then Zionism started, as I said earlier, the idea of Zionism in 1897. And Palestine was not their first choice, because they weren't interested in the return of the Jews, or even the connection of the Jews to Palestine. They wanted to solve the European Jewish problem, because the Jews in Palestine didn't have a problem. But in Europe, Russia, and everywhere else in Europe, there was pogroms, discrimination, it was horrible. It was a horrible situation. And that's even before the rise of Nazism and Hitler. Things were bad. And not just bad, they were horrible. So they wanted to solve the European Jewish problem. And how you solve it? Get rid of the Jews. And how the founders of Zionism appealed to the government this idea of having a homeland for the Jews by themselves. And they say Zionism is such a great thing. It's the most racist, anti-Semitic
ideology I ever encountered. It's an ideology that says a Jew cannot live with anybody else, has to be in a country by themselves. What are you saying about the Jews? No. The Jews are good people. They lived next to my grandmother when she was in her younger years as neighbors, attended each other's holy occasions, each other's festivities, weddings, invitations to the different things that happened. They were neighbors. On the Sabbath, on Friday nights, for observant Jews, they can't light the light in their, the kerosene lamp in their house. So who would light it for them? My grandmother, the little child, would come, she would light their light for them. They're neighbors, like any other neighbors. They had no problems with it. But in Europe, there was a problem. So they start looking. Where we want to have this Jewish state? And Palestine was not even mentioned in the first few choices. There was a thought of Uganda, Mozambique, there was discussion of Argentina, and few other possibilities. Cyprus came up, the Sinai Peninsula came up, and they said, well, there is this family that's multi-billionaires those days, they're very rich, they're not going to support a move to Uganda. But we can play on their religion. And that family name is the Rothschilds. So we said, okay, that was the idea of Palestine. We connect that because we have a religious connection, and that will get support of the religious Jew, the return, quote unquote, to Palestine. That's how they settled on Palestine. Before it was formalized, the Ottoman Empire was defeated, and who was replacing the Ottoman Empire? It wasn't the indigenous people. For us as Palestinians and Middle Easterners and other people that went under the Ottoman Empire, got replaced, one occupier with another. That's all that happened. Actually, a more brutal occupiers. We had ended up with Britain and France dividing the Middle East between them. Boundaries of war, the winner take all, so we split it. We carved it out. And at that time, they were just beginning to say, hey, there is some riches in this, underneath this earth. There's two things they discovered, that there is oil, and that's the future. And then there is the bridge, the trading route between Africa, Middle East, and Asia that connects these worlds together. That's important for trade. So we got the center for world global trade, and we got this new energy source, seemed at the time infinite. That's oil. It wasn't bad those days. It was great because there was no thought of clean energy. So we keep it. We keep it. And they appointed governors and military governors in different parts. And Palestine was the share of Britain, along with Jordan, Iraq, and parts of Egypt, Lebanon and Syria were French. That was France's share. And this was done underhanded in an agreement called the Sykes-Picot. Sykes is a British foreign minister, I believe, or foreign secretary, and Picot was the French. They met secretly, and they drew up the map and divided it. It didn't came out to light until the fall of the Tsar of Russia in 1917. Then the communists found this document and they released it, they published it. It was first published by the Russians in Izvestia. And Lenin referred to it as an agreement between thieves. Okay. One occupation is gone, another is there. When it came to Palestine, it was unique occupation. Also, before we go into that, the San Remo Agreement of 1920 was a secret agreement between the Allies that gave Britain a mandate. The mandate means that you would rule over these countries and help them to stand on their own feet, that's their terminology, and be able to govern themselves, and then you'll give them their independence. And it has a timeline, it has an end date. It's not an indefinite. No, the mandate on Palestine was supposed to end at the end of 1947, 1948. That's when the Britain supposed to leave Palestine, end the British mandate, and Palestine becomes an independent state, an independent Arab state, Palestinian state. Well, things start changing from day one. And things got accelerated with the rise of Nazism and the Holocaust. We had to solve the problem of the Jews. We can't watch them die. So we helped them immigrate to Palestine. We don't open our borders to them. We don't bring them over to the United States. We turn them away. And there has been ships that when got ready to embark to cross the Atlantic and come to the United States, they were turned back. Theodore Herzl, when asked if the Zionist movement will help Jews that want to immigrate to other parts of the world to escape persecution in Europe, and German persecution in particular, his response was not one penny, not one, would the Zionist movement help any Jew to go anywhere else except Palestine. So they were not interested in actually protecting and saving the Jews as much as they were interested in conquering this important piece of land called Palestine. And the British played a very, very ugly game when a ship with Jewish refugees on it, and that's what they were. They were refugees. They were in terrible condition. When a ship docked in Haifa or Jaffa, they would come out, and the Palestinians, in many cases, would open their homes for them. Then, to come back from work the next day, and here is a paramilitary guy from the Haganah or the Argonne or the Stern gang standing in front of their house telling them they can't come in. It's not theirs anymore. These are actual facts. This is how it happened. And the British were supporting of this policy. Then they built the kibbutz, supposedly a farming communities. But these farming communities had paramilitary guards and organizations. And on top of that, they were supplied with arms and training by the British. But in the meantime, if a Palestinian Arab, whether it be Muslim or a Jew, was caught not with a rifle, but with a bullet, with a couple of rounds in his pocket, that's life sentence. And in some cases, death. In the early 30s, two young men from our village that were working, they were working outside of Jerusalem in a place called Shafat, outskirts of Jerusalem. At the end of their workday, they headed home. Well, it just happened that earlier that afternoon, there has been a military attack by Palestinians on an Israeli settlement or an Israeli kibbutz or mustaltana, mustamara, whatever you want to call it, colony. And these guys come along, they get picked up. What are you doing here? They're working in Shafat. They've taken where you live, they bring them to the village. They go into their houses and search their houses. Well, Lord and behold, in between their bedding in Palestine, the way those days we kept our bedding, mattresses and blankets, and we fold them, and there is an indentation in the wall, usually the bedroom wall, about this big, and it's about 12, 13 inches wide, the width of the wall, and we stack him. And in the evening, take him down and spread him, and we sleep. So if somebody owned a rifle or something, where do they hide it? In between the mattresses and the blankets and covers. When they checked their houses, they found a rifle. Can't be even established that it belonged to those two young men. But that was enough for the British to take these two young men, convict them, and hang them. And their bodies were delivered to their family the next day on ladders. They put the body on the ladders so they could carry it on the back of a military vehicle. Problem solved. This is the kind of treatment and the double standard that was going on during the British rule. In 1922, the United Nations formalized the mandate that was agreed on in San Remo, came a UN mandate with the stipulation of an independent Palestine before 1948. But before that, something happened in 1917. Balfour wrote a letter that became to be known as the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a simple letter on November 2nd, 1917, that he wrote, "Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet." And here is the declaration. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their most endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It's being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the right and political stature enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. That is it. That is the Balfour Declaration. Given something that don't belong to them to start with, to a third party that it didn't belong to. And that is legitimacy. And the way they treated the non-Jewish communities, it is incredible. It is incredible how the Arabs of Palestine were treated. These armed gangs, and that's how they were referred to, it's not my terminology. They made a point of doing everything humanly possible to make the Palestinians leave in order to escape and survive. They would go into, and there was numerous massacres, not just one or two or three or four, numerous massacres, where entire villages were wiped out. And if there was a skirmish or a firefight next to your village, and you left your home till it's over, you went to the next village, you didn't go across the country, you went 3 blocks down. When you come back, you can't go into your house. This is a practice by the Israelis and the Zionists that exists till today. When a Palestinian is doing a normal thing that any human being will do, when there is danger to you or to your family, you will try to leave. You run for safety. You run for shelter until it's over, then you go back home. Not in the case of the Palestinians. And not the Palestinian refugees that just cross the border to Jordan or to Lebanon or to Syria, but Palestinians that went from one neighborhood to another, from one village to another. I can give you an example of the village of Al Birwa, that is in the Akka region, outside of Akka, and the village of Jdeida. And I know that there are stories and details because my wife is from there. The village of Al Birwa, there was some Palestinian resistance to the Urgan and Haganah when they came, tried to take those villages over. So they were overwhelmed and they took over the village. The civilian population in the village, there was about, according to my wife's grandfather, there was about 8 fighters in the village. So the rest of the village, and he would name it, it's all be with family that were from and all that. They left to Jdeida because there was no resistance in Jdeida. So they left there, and it's only less than 2 kilometers apart. You know, when this battle was over, win or lose, we'll go back. They were not allowed to go back. And their descendants, some of them till today, live in Jdeida. And if they want to cultivate and to use their land that's in the Birwa area, they have to rent it. They have to rent it from the settlement that was built on their land. They allow them to cultivate it, but you have to pay rent. And the town itself, where the battle took place in Birwa, till today, it's just ruins. There is nothing there. No one is allowed to go back, no one is allowed to build. The settlement was built on the outskirts and different on their land. And if you want to use your land, you have to pay rent on a yearly basis, then you can cultivate it. But it's mine. It's my father, my grandfather. It's mine. No, you have to pay. They sometimes you will hear the right of return, aliyah, the right of the Jews to return to Palestine. Okay. Well, the Palestinian Jews never left. How could they return? So when you throw that in their face, they tell you, well, you can be a Palestinian or an Israeli just by your religion. It doesn't have to be by your DNA. So if somebody was to convert today from this class, convert to Judaism, and you go to Israel on a tour, you can become an Israeli citizen, and the process starts at the airport under the law of the right of return, the gathering of the exiles. But for me, as a Palestinian, I carry the same U.S. passport, same as you, same as anybody. But my name happens to be Adib Abid, and place of birth is Jerusalem. On my passport, I was a rebel from day one. When we applied for it, for the U.S. passport, and they asked country of birth, I said Jerusalem. It's supposed to have said Jordan. And I looked at my dad, I said, but I don't have a Jordanian passport. I was a minor. When I came to the US, I was 13, turned 14 here. And I said, but I didn't have a Jordanian passport. They gave me a travel document from the Israelis. So, no, I'm not putting Jordanian, I'm going to put Jerusalem. So I would put Jerusalem and stay. Place of birth, Jerusalem. I go to Ben Gurion Airport. What do you about it? Okay, yeah. Place of birth, Jerusalem. Step aside. I got stepped aside. For 10 years, 5 trips I was denied entry. Denied entry. Why? Security reasons. What's your security reasons? Tell me, what am I being accused of? Entry denied. 5 consecutive years. Then and I would tell them, I'll see you next year. I've got $1,000 that I'm willing to spend, but I'm not giving up. I'm coming back. So the following year I went, and they had a meeting. They brought me in after interrogation with 3 old guys. Not now, those days they were old. And they introduced themselves. I am with the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm with the Mossad, an intelligence agency, and I'm with the Shin Bet, the internal security. And this young lady, about in her early 20s, she's with the Department of Interior. Okay. What do you want? Why do you think the IDF has a problem with you? And I would look at him and say, well, the IDF guy is sitting right here. Why don't you ask him? Maybe I would know. Then the IDF guy would look at the other guys and say, no, it's not really important. Why do you think the Interior has a problem with, or the Shin Bet, or the Mossad? And this went around in circles for about 15, 20 minutes. And finally I looked at him and said, okay, what's next? How long is my entry going to be denied? And they said, well, we don't know. It's in her hand. To that 20-some-year-old young lady on the computer. So I said, okay, ma'am, how long? I said, just a minute. She typed something on the computer and she looks at me and says, don't think about it for 5 years. And before you come, go to the embassy in Washington and get a visa. And I looked at her and I said, who do you think you're talking to? A 4-year-old? If I go to the embassy to get a visa, they're going to send it to you, and you guys are going to say no. So no, I'll see you in 5 years. I'm not doing the visa. 5 years later, I went, but this time to Jordan. I said, I'll cross the Allenby Bridge. If they turn me back, I can contact my mom, my sisters. They'll come and we'll spend a week in Jordan. I'll get to see them. Because during that time, my father passed away. And I didn't get a chance to see him. So I go in, get interrogated for a good 2.5 hours about weird things. Who do you know in New York? Which organization you work with? Who did you know in school from GUPS, the General Union of Palestinian Students? Why did you travel to Lebanon? Why is your wife from Lebanon? Weird questions. So anyway, I was answering them also in a weird way. Okay, because I don't like occupation. That's why I work with these organizations. I work with many organizations. Wherever there is injustice, we have to speak up. And, I pay the price. Like I'm sitting here talking to you, that's one of the prices that I pay, and I'm willing to pay it. 2 hours. And finally she said, okay, now it's not in my hand. I'm going to send it to Tel Aviv, and I'll let you know their decision. Just one moment. I have a statement to make. Listen, I've been talking to you for all this time, and you're giving me a yes or no answer or no answer at all. Now you want to make a statement? I said, yes. Can I? I said, sure, go ahead. I said, okay. Everything in my life is the same as has been for the last 15, 20 years, particularly the last 5 years. I own the same business, work in the same place, live in the same house. My children are just growing and going to schools. I was in good health. Now, as you can see, I have a bunch of medicines that I'm carrying with me. I had a father and a mother. My dad passed away and I couldn't see him. Now my mom is getting up in age and I would like to be able to see her. This is my statement. Now he looked at me, and I don't care how bad your enemy is, there is always a human element sometimes with some of them that you can touch. And I think with that particular young lady, must have struck a nerve with her or something. Because she said, you know what, Mr. Abid, and that's the first time she called me Mr. Abid. I'm going to send your statement exactly as you said it, and I hope that you can go in and see your mom. But let me ask you just one question. I said, yes, ma'am. He said, why you're coming through the bridge and not at the airport? You have a U.S. passport. I looked at her, I was honest as can be. I said, look, when I go at the airport, entry denied, I got put in a holding cell until the same plane I came on departs the next day, and I got put on it. So if I came out of London, I'll go back to London. If I came out of JFK, I end up back in JFK. But coming across the bridge, if you deny me entry, I cross back to Jordan, pick up the phone, call my mom and my sisters, they'll come and see me. Because I don't trust you, the bottom line. That's why I'm doing it. He said, well, I could understand. I said, that's fine. So I sat there for 2 hours waiting, 2.5 hours actually, and she comes back with a smile on her face. Mr. Adib, you can go see your mom. I said, gee, thanks. Does that mean that I can come back anytime? She looked at me and said, no. This time you could go in. So every time I go there, I go through the same stuff. Yes,
When you came to the U.S. at 14, your mom and dad didn't come with you?
our family story is long. My grandfather came to the U.S. in the late 1800s on the lottery. His name number came out and he came to the U.S. and he served in the U.S. Army Medical Corps in World War I. He died in a car accident that hit and run, well, not a hit and run, drunk driver actually. He was with a friend of his crossing the street. The guy goes over the pavement. He pushes his friend out of the way. He gets hit and he died. Those days, the U.S. Embassy or consulate in Jerusalem told my grandma that she would get his pension or Social Security, which was like, started out those days at $80-some or whatever, but that was money. And when her kids turn 18, they can come to the consulate and get an immigrant visa based on the service of my grandfather. So every time one of my uncles turns 18, he goes to the embassy, gets his immigrant visa, and he comes to the States by himself. And my father was the last, and by himself again. And they would work in the United States for a few years. 3 to 5, save a few dollars, come back to Palestine, and do something with that money they made, build a house, add an addition to the house, fix a piece of land, buy a piece of land, do something. And make sure that the wife is pregnant, then head out. So when he comes back 3 years later, there's a toddler. Then that's your father. 6 months is the maximum they'll spend home. They get introduced to the baby, do something with the money, the wife is pregnant, off they go. So the age differences between me and my siblings represents the time that Dad was gone. And we tease each other, and my mom, God rest their soul, said, oh, Dad missed you between me and Jamila because he didn't stay that long, but only 2 years. But this is, so in '67, it happened that my older brother, who has declared early on in his school career at the 6th grade, that I don't want to study anymore. I'm done. I want to go to America and I want to make money. That's it. So he was in the United States with my dad, and my uncle was already in the States with his 2 older sons. But one uncle, the oldest, was in the village of Pirmalak. And I did a few things that were not to his liking. So he sends a telegraph to his brothers, hey, I have a hard enough time taking care of my family. Take your family with you to the US until the dust settle and things calm down, then you can send them, because now it's just too much for me to handle, and I don't want to be held responsible. So they went to the consulate and went to the Israelis, and they were more than happy to issue you a departure to leave. Oh, no problem. They gave us what's called laissez-passer, which is a travel document. It's not a passport, but you don't have to wait to get a passport. Just get that travel document and get out. On our way to meet the taxi cab that's going to take us to the airport, I was walking with my grandma. I was close to my grandmother. And she's crying. I said, Grandma, why are you crying? It's going to be a few months. 6 months or so, that there are already UN resolution 242, and occupation going to end, and Israel is going to leave, and we'll come back. 6 months maximum. And she looked at me and she said, Nadeem, this is what we said when we left our village, Suba, in 1948, that it will be a few weeks, at the most, few days, then we will return. You saw what happened to Suba when I took you there, which he did. Suba's demolished, and they built a park next to it, and until now we haven't returned. So if somebody leaves under the pretense of a few weeks or a few months, that's not happening. So if I see you, that's God's work. And she was the only one that got it right. He's the only one that got it right, understood it correctly. We want to take a break now, and after the break, I chose a film that I want to show that describes Palestine from the 1920s until 48, how it was, and it throws a comparison. It's really very informative film, and also gives me an excuse to rest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.